You know, hunters everywhere in America, all the places I've been studying whitetails and hunting, they all have one common statement to say. The only thing predictable about whitetails is they're unpredictable. You ever wonder about that? Before hunting season starts, you probably see some deer out in the farm field somewhere, and they're there every morning, and around 10 o'clock or so they disappear, and then they're there every afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they go day after day, and that's kind of amazing. But when you get out there and start hunting, it isn't that way. And you ever thought about why that is? Well, it's because of hunting, because of what you're doing. You can change that. If you're an aggressive hunter, what's an aggressive hunter? That's a hunter that spends a lot of time on foot hunting whitetails, sneaking through the woods, trying to, looking for a deer, or stalking or trailing a deer, or making drives. When a drive comes through an area, boy, that area is done for quite a few days, if not the entire hunting season. But one hunter even, moving around all day long in a hunting area, you can alarm enough deer to make them think about maybe it'd be best to go back to the place where I've been going for many years during hunting season, where it's safe from hunters. Some of those areas that whitetails go to when they're bothered a lot by hunters, or frightened at them, or they hear nearby gunshots, some of those places can be many miles away. And before you know it, there aren't many deer in there, and of course they can't be predictable. You can't predict where they're going to be in the morning, that kind of thing, when that kind of action is going on in the field during the hunting season. But you can change that. You can change that by being a stand hunter. We'll get back to that in a minute. But when you're a stand hunter, whether you're sitting on the ground or on a tree, or up in a tree, if a whitetail finds you, and they're very good at it today, a lot better than they were, say, 30, 40 years ago. 30, 40 years ago, whitetails were terribly vulnerable to stand hunting, but not today. And the reason is, 10 million of us have been sitting in trees for several decades, weeding out the deer that are particularly vulnerable to tree stand hunting. And we're creating a new race of whitetails that's pretty smart about stand hunting, and that's the problem. That it's getting to be harder and harder to take whitetails from elevated stands. But at any rate, when a whitetail finds you as a stand hunter, you're not aggressive at all. You're just sitting there. And they aren't particularly worried about you. They won't become nocturnal like a lot of them do when they're having to deal with aggressive hunters on foot, and they're not likely to abandon their ranges either. But even if when you're a stand hunter, that means you're going to be 100% effective, because nowadays, whenever a whitetail finds you in a tree stand or on the ground stand hunting, and that happens within hours, and at the best within the day and a half of the beginning of a hunting season. But once they find you, rather than become nocturnal or abandon their range, they just start living quite normally, a safe distance away from where they found you. So you can, when you're sitting, you pick a spot in the woods. Let's say you end up in a doe home range. A doe home range is about the size of 3 40-acre farms. That's not too big of an area, but once that doe and the young trailing it find you, they can live quite normal lives in that small of an area. And bucks have larger home ranges. If a buck overlaps the doe's range, or several buck ranges overlap the doe range, within hours to a day and a half, they're all going to find you. If you haven't seen any deer in 2 days, all the deer within that probably at least a half square mile know where you are, and they're already avoiding you. And nowadays, it doesn't pay to just be patient and sit in the same tree stand day after day after day during a hunting season. You should be moving to new stand sites, at least 100 yards or more away, at least every day and a half, or say every 2 days. because the rest of the time you're pretty much wasting your time, except for the possibility of being able to take a inexperienced yearling or a fawn that isn't with its mother. If you want to take older deer, older bucks, if you want to start seeing older bucks, you can't sit in one tree stand all the time. But at any rate, at least when you're a stand hunter, you're not forcing deer to abandon their ranges or become nocturnal. And so if you're skilled at it, and if you do move at least every 2 days, your odds become much greater for seeing deer than you would if you just stay in one place, because most of those deer are staying there in their home ranges, and they're becoming predictable. You know, deer can't be predictable when they're not there, and they can't become predictable when they're running helter-skelter until they finally abandon their range or become nocturnal. And if you're a stand hunter, they can continue to be predictable the rest of the hunting season, the whole time. Now, part of the hunter's problem is that you don't know really what is predictable of whitetails. Like, for example, every 24 hours, we'll say usually beginning about 4 in the morning, whitetails start feeding, and they feed till about 10 in the morning, and then during the middle of the day, from 10 to about 4 in the afternoon, they bed. They stay in their bed, and they refuse to do anything else but bed during that period. And then from 4 until about 10 in the evening, well after dark, they feed again. And then in the middle of the night, between 10 and 4 in the morning, they bed again. That's really predictable. When they feed, they got to feed in an area where the food is, and most of the time the food is in a fairly open area, and the special kinds of foods that they like to eat are there. And they have to eat. That makes them predictable. And if you get out there early enough in the morning, your odds of seeing deer feeding are much better than they would be if you went out there in the middle of the day. But you see, you're starting to get the idea of what's predictable about whitetails and why they can't be predictable for most hunters. So become a stand hunter and become a patient stand hunter. If you give those deer a break, hunt in a manner that so that they don't have to raise their tails and flee. That's the worst thing that can happen during the hunting season, believe it or not. If you hunt in a way that allows whitetails to stay within their ranges, then they become very predictable. They aren't predictable every day. The best hunter in the world isn't going to always predict properly. And, you know, in the case of bucks, if there's a doe and estrus a mile away and you thought he was going to be in this feeding area here today, he'll be over there a mile away. Well, that happens all the time in whitetail hunting. But your odds of being a successful hunter are much, much better when the deer within the area that you hunt don't have to raise their tails and run. Become a stand hunter, and that won't happen very often. So, good luck.